A lot of people like uploading videos to YouTube and other online video services. Whether you're playing your favorite racing game, your favorite side scroller, trying to take over the world,
This time, when I head out into the world, they're not gonna stop me.
or just heading out on an adventure, your projects can be rather large after they are edited together. In this video, I will show you how I compress my videos down for YouTube. So I'm going to give the quick and dirty as far as instructions go and just tell you exactly how I've compressed videos since the beginning. The first thing you'll need to do is in your video editor of choice, when you export your project, you pick the best quality settings the editor allows for. Some allow a bit more fine control over the video output, and others just have a couple general quality buttons to determine the settings that you can access. Either way, just choose the highest quality possible for your editor of choice. So, assuming you've done all that, we'll treat these two videos as your project outputs. The one on the right is a 1080p video, about 10 minutes long, and 3.14 gigs in size. And the one on your left is a 4K video file, about 6.11 gigs in size. They're both 60 frames per second, which if you're uploading to YouTube, I mean, why not? Especially if you're doing a gameplay or something where there's a lot of movement going on. But either way, the settings that you will be using here in a minute won't change versus 60 or 30. But once you get your video, you'll need to download Handbrake, which you can find at handbrake.fr if I remember correctly, and install. Take your video project that's finished and just drag it in. And here's your quality page. You'll see a bunch of tabs and then the title of the project and everything. Don't worry about any of this up here. This also works as ripping DVDs. That's what these settings up here are for. But since there's one file, we don't have to worry about that. So your summary, the only thing you need to do is to make sure that I always used MP4 as the container format. Click Web Optimize, because if you don't, YouTube will take a bit longer to process it. Dimensions, just make sure that it's not going to crop out anything. Under filters, make sure everything's off. You can the deinterlace setting is set to decomb by default. You can just leave that alone because it's not going to do anything and it doesn't make it go any slower. Another thing you can do is if at this point you want to make your video in black and white, you can check the grayscale right here, and it puts out actually pretty good black and white. But here's the important tab. Here's basically your quality outputs. Now for 1080p, just use H.264. There's H.265, but that's really was never meant for 1080p stuff. Just leave it as H.264. For frame rate, I mean, you can, if it's 60, you can go ahead and click 60, or if you don't want to keep up with that, you can just do same as source. But I mean, if you know you're doing 60, you might as well pick it. And then constant frame rate. And over here, this is your quality setting. I've never used the 2-pass encoder or just the target bit rate. If you want to target a specific bit rate, let's say if you're archiving videos for just purely offline use and you know what you want, you can go ahead and plug your bit rate in here. And I would actually recommend using the 2-pass encoding, because the first pass will kind of analyze the video, and then the second pass will go ahead and compress it all down based on the first pass. But just use constant quality. For YouTube, I've always just used 20. For personal use, I've gone down to 15 for like archival stuff, but that was for like higher quality Blu-rays. And I've gone up to 22 for static shots, so actually I would recommend if you're just doing some sort of news reporting or documenting from like behind your desk where everything's static, you shouldn't really notice any quality loss if you go up to 22. The big thing is just you'll just get a smaller file. The scale is logarithmic, so that's something to keep in mind. Kind of like sound. 60 decibels is not twice as loud as 30. Then go down to optimize video. Just leave it at fast. And the encoder profile, go up to high. And then the encoder level, go to auto. Now, of course, for 1080p, you shouldn't really need anything more than 4. So you can leave that be. If not, or if it doesn't matter what kind of footage you work with, if you work with tons of different video outputs and sizes, you can just put it at auto and it'll kind of figure out what it needs. But once that's done, just make sure that your audio, it should be included by default. And then just hit start encode. And then you wait. Okay, so now that our encode is done, our starting file was, remember, 3.14 gigs. And we'll go over to the output folder, and our final video that we would upload to YouTube is 1.08 gigs, so a little more than 2 gigs shaved off. Now when you're talking about 3 gigs total, that's enormous, and it'll save a lot of time, especially if your upload speed is slow. So pretty crucial. Even if you're just using it for personal use, just shaving off that much for your archival or your NAS or whatever that you're going to stream from, or your personal movie collection, it adds up over time. I mean, a 60% reduction in file size over multiple videos is going to add up a lot, and it's going to save you a lot of time if you're uploading. Now on to 4K, which, as you see, I already rendered it out, and I'll explain why in a second. Take our 4K video file, which is 6.11 gigs, drop it in. Now we'll have to create a preset for this because it won't actually let you go up to 3840 by 2160 by default. So I went ahead and made a profile ahead of time. Just check the Align AV and Web Optimized, and then go to your dimensions. Make sure it's not going to crop anything out. Of course, I had a denoiser on when I made the preset, but you see it matches the settings for the 1080p. And then for this one, we're using 60 constant, and instead of H.264, we're going to use H.265. It takes off a lot of settings, which makes it easier, but go ahead and go up to 20 over here, and you don't have to change anything here. Just leave it at auto, and that's it. Go ahead and hit start encode. Now I'll tell you why I did it ahead of time. It's because it takes my system more than an hour. For this 10-minute clip, it took my system an hour and 20 minutes to get the 10-minute clip compressed down. Is it worth it though? Absolutely. So our first file was 6.11 gigs, and you see the final video that we would upload to YouTube is 2.6 gigs. So about the same percentage improvement with 1080p versus 4K. It takes a lot longer to actually handle the file, and that's because of the H.265. Now, H.265 was created for 4K from what I understand. So, and H.264 is not going to work as well with 4K. It's not going to compress it down as much. It's worth the wait. Now, granted, it is just my system. It's a little bit older, and I'm due for an upgrade here very shortly. But other than that, that's it. Pretty simple. I've always done that. I've kind of played with it all myself, and that's just the settings that I have kind of determined through years of playing with it and trying to come up with some optimized settings that I can just use all the time. And then recently, earlier this year, messing around with 4K didn't take as long, but that about wraps things up. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer it.